Welcome to this explainer. Today we are diving headfirst into a massive paradigm shift in network diagnostics. This is actually part 4 of an 8-part tutorial called IPv6 Troubleshooting for System Administrators and Technical Support. It's brought to us by Virtualization Options LLC, their Colorado-based tech research education and advisory group. So if you're a sysadmin or a tech support pro, and you know IPv4 like the back of your hand, but now you're tasked with supporting your organization's migration to IPv6, well, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to tackle the core challenges you'll face when your troubleshooting instincts are still deeply rooted in the old IPv4 ways. Let's kick things off with a pretty provocative question. You know what drives network admins absolutely crazy? It's this. Why does a connection that appears to be entirely working just silently fail in a dual-stack environment? It's incredibly frustrating, right? But it highlights exactly why we urgently need to unlearn our ingrained IPv4 muscle memory. The old rules simply don't apply anymore. What looks like a perfectly functional network might actually be masking a hidden layer of failure. So, here's our roadmap for today's diagnostic playbook. We're going to start by unlearning that IPv4 muscle memory, then take a hard look at the reality of dual-stack networks and break down some core protocol mechanics. After that, we'll tackle fixing PMTUD discovery issues, navigate the headaches of tunnels and VPNs, and finally wrap it all up with the absolute unbreakable rules of IPv6 troubleshooting. Let's get into it.
All right, Section 1. Let's talk about unlearning that IPv4 muscle memory. You really need to internalize that IPv6 isn't just a larger address space, it is a fundamentally different protocol. Your old tricks, they're going to fail you here. In IPv4, you might ping a broadcast address like 255.255.255.255 just to see who's on the subnet. Well, in IPv6, broadcast is literally dead. It's gone. IPv6 uses multicast exclusively. Plus, in the IPv4 world, you generally expect one IP address per interface, and you rely really heavily on NAT, or network address translation. But in IPv6, every single device is potentially globally routable, and NAT is largely absent. That completely flips your firewall design and security assumptions right on their head. To really see this new normal, just look at how an IPv6 interface operates. In the IPv4 days, you had your one address, right? Maybe 192.168.0.10, but here, a single interface is simultaneously hosting a link local address, usually starting with FE80, alongside global unicast addresses and even temporary privacy addresses. The crazy part? They all coexist perfectly on the same interface without any conflict whatsoever. So if you see multiple IPs, please do not try to troubleshoot this as an error. It's exactly how the protocol was designed to work.
Moving right along to Section 2, the dual-stack reality.
Now, in production networks where you have IPv4 and IPv6 running at the same time, things don't always just loudly break. Instead, they fail silently. There's this mechanism modern browsers use called happy eyeballs. It's defined in RFC 8305. Basically, the browser prefers IPv6, but if the connection stalls, it races it against IPv4 after a 250 millisecond delay. So what does this mean for you? It means if your IPv6 path is broken, your users aren't going to see a helpful error page. Nope. Instead, they're going to suffer this hidden 250 millisecond latency penalty on literally every single connection, and they'll start complaining about slow page loads that are nearly impossible to track down if you're only looking at your IPv4 traffic.
So, how do we stop chasing ghosts? Your immediate fix is to independently test both stacks. Since a dual-stack failure can be completely invisible without explicit testing, you've got to use explicit commands. Running curl-6 and curl-4 will actually force your traffic over a specific protocol. This lets you isolate the failing stack before you draw any false conclusions and waste your entire afternoon.
Okay, Section 3. Let's unpack the core protocol mechanics. Because the foundational mechanics have changed, how devices detect conflicts has changed too. Here's how duplicate address detection, or DAD, actually works. First, a host sends out a neighbor solicitation for a tentative address to a multicast group. If another host responds, boom, a conflict is detected. The address gets flagged as DAD failed, and you get absolutely no global connectivity. A really common cause for this, something sysadmins run into all the time, is when cloned virtual machine MAC addresses end up generating duplicate EUI64 addresses. If you're checking your interface and you spot that DAD failed flag, you know exactly what you're dealing with.
There's also a major shift in how default routes are handled. IPv6 totally abandons DHCP gateway leases. Instead, it relies on router advertisements, or RAs.
If your router stops sending these periodic RAs, or say a switch blocks them, your hosts will just silently lose their default route. You have to use specific OS commands now to verify if your host actually has a path out. So on Linux, you'd use IP-6 route show default. Windows and Cisco have their own equivalents. The key takeaway here, don't look for a DHCP gateway, look for the route.
All right, Section 4, let's fix PMTUD and MTU issues. This is perhaps the most notorious failure mode in modern networking. Let me know if this classic symptom sounds familiar. You ping a server, and those small packets succeed perfectly. But the second you fire up an SSH session or try an HTTPS file copy, the connection just stalls right after the TCP handshake. It just hangs there. If you see this, you are almost certainly staring down a path MTU discovery or PMTUD failure.
Here's the exact mechanism behind that failure. Your source sends a large IPv6 packet. Somewhere down the line, a router hits a link with a smaller MTU limit. Now, the router does exactly what it's supposed to do. It generates an ICMPv6 Type 2 message, which is literally called packet too big, to warn the sender, hey, fragmentous data. But then step 4 happens. An overzealous firewall blocks that critical ICMPv6 warning packet. The sender never gets the memo, it just keeps waiting, and your connection drops into a black hole.
So how do we cure the symptom? Well, your primary fix is that you absolutely must explicitly permit ICMPv6 Type 2 inbound through all your firewalls. Alternatively, you can configure TCP MSS clamping on your router. But listen, the golden rule here is that the absolute minimum MTU for IPv6 is 1280 bytes. Never, ever configure anything lower than that. And if you want to confirm you've got a PMTUD issue in the first place, just run a small ping of 100 bytes and compare it to a large ping of 1400 bytes. If that large one drops, you've found your culprit for sure.
Moving to Section 5, let's talk about tunnels, VPNs, and translation.
As we bridge the IPv4 and IPv6 worlds, we're seeing some new failure points emerge, specifically with NAT64 and DNS64. Now, these technologies are vital bridges. NAT64 translates IPv6 packets to IPv4 at the gateway, while DNS64 synthesizes AAA records so an IPv6-only client can actually resolve an IPv4-only hostname. But here's the catch. If an application hardcodes an IPv4 literal IP address, like trying to connect directly to 1.2.3.4, it bypasses DNS64 entirely. That breaks NAT64 and the connection fails. Hard-coded IPs are a massive headache here. And we have to talk about everyone's favorite frustration, VPNs. Older VPN clients handle IPv6 terribly. They usually do one of two really annoying things. Either they dangerously leak IPv6 traffic completely outside the secure tunnel, which exposes your real IP and bypasses corporate security, or they just completely block IPv6 without tunneling it, causing literally every IPv6-enabled site to fail. To fix this, you have to explicitly configure the VPN to tunnel the IPv6 traffic properly. Or, honestly, as a last resort, just disable IPv6 entirely on the client adapter. Finally, Section 6, Essential IPv6 Troubleshooting Rules.
To wrap things up, I need every network admin watching to memorize this reference table. In IPv4, you might be used to blanket blocking ICMP for security reasons. Do not do that here. ICMPv6 is not optional. These specific message types, Type 1 for destination unreachable, Type 2 for packet too big, Type 3 for time exceeded, and Types 133 through 137 for neighbor discovery protocol, they must traverse your firewalls. If you block them, you are going to break address resolution, routing, and path MTU discovery right out of the gate.
So, to summarize our core diagnostic takeaways, never treat ICMPv6 as a security threat to be blanket blocked. Remember that Neighbor Discovery Protocol entirely replaces ARP, and you're going to need MLD snooping on your switches to prevent multicast flooding. Respect the fact that multiple IP addresses on a single interface are totally normal behavior. And lastly, always document and track your prefix delegations. If you don't, your network will silently break the moment your ISP changes your prefix. I want to leave you with a thought to really challenge your diagnostic approach moving forward. Are you ready to stop applying IPv4 band-aids and start troubleshooting in native IPv6? It is time to fully embrace the new paradigm. Unlearning your old habits is for sure the hardest part of this, but once you trust the actual mechanics of IPv6, your networks are going to be faster, more efficient, and truly resilient. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, happy troubleshooting out there.